Hello and welcome to Scrappy Loom Sewing. I'm JC Joellen, and today I'm going to show you a quilt block that for a quilt that I'm calling Charming Hearts. It's been a lot of fun making this quilt. It's taken me back to my childhood days, back to macaroni art days, which I really loved. And so I'm really having a good time making this quilt, and I hope you will too. It is made up of a little bit of piecing for the background of the block, and then there's applique and embellishment. So let me show you what the finished blocks look like with some of them. Each block I'm doing is different. I'm not having any two exactly the same. And so this is 9 of the blocks that I have finished. And I'll kind of let you see each one of them. This one has got a lot of buttons on it, but they blend with the fabric until you get up close. So, to get started on it, you will need 2 fabrics for the background. I've got 2 different prints for my background. Multiple fabrics for my hearts. A fabric or print for my sashing. And then there's 2 for the cornerstone. And then I've used a lot of embellishments. I've got some fabric flowers that I made, different ones, and then I've got buttons, because I've got a ton of buttons. I'm trying to figure out a way to use them up, so that's how I came up with this idea. Metallic trims, some other apparel trims, laces, and lots of buttons. Anything else you want to put on there? I'll probably end up using some decorative threads and I don't know, beads. So whatever you want to put on there. But like I said, I've got a ton of buttons. I've got a ton of threads. So I'm just trying to use this stuff up before I leave this earth. So I've got a big job ahead of me. To get started on this, you will need a 12.5-inch background square. You will need 2 sashing strips that are 2.5 by 12.5 inches long. Then you'll need 2 strips for your cornerstone that are 1.5 inches wide. Now, they can be longer than this because you'll cut multiple pieces out of it, but I'm just using these 2 small short strips to show you what I'm doing, how to make them. So 2 1.5-inch strips. And to get started, first you will take your 2 strips for your cornerstone, put them right sides together, and then stitch a 1/4-inch seam, which will give you a piece like this. And you can see the stitching here. Then you'll take this and you will open it up and press the seam to the dark side. On this one I'm just going to finger press. You end up with the strip set like this. Once it's pressed open, it'll lay nice and flat. Once it's pressed open, you will cut 1.5 strips the other direction. You need 2 for each block. And you end up with 2 strip sets like this. You'll take these, you'll flip them opposite directions, put them right sides together, nest in your seams, so that they're lined up perfectly like that. And what I mean by nesting them is you push them right smack up against each other and you press it down to make sure it's flat. Press the two together so it's flat. And then you'll stitch a 1/4 inch seam here. Press that open and you end up with a cornerstone, which is a 4-patch. Next, with your 12.5 inch block, you will add one of your sashing pieces to the side like this. And you will stitch down this seam a 1/4 inch, down this side a 1/4 inch seam. And then press that open. Pressing the seam towards the sashing. Which gives you a piece like this. And then you just open that out. And you end up with a block like this. Next, you would take your cornerstone and your other sashing piece, and you will stitch those two together. Right sides together, 1/4 inch seam down the short edge of the sashing strip. And you end up with a strip set like this. This you would then stitch to your block. You want the, well, for me, I put this burgundy block up against the 12.5 inch block each time. And again, you will nest those seams. If you press them towards the sashing each time, they will nest. And then you will stitch a 1/4 inch seam down the side here. You can pin. I don't pin for these, but if you need to pin, pin. It's not a problem to pin. I don't do it because I'm trying to save time most of the time. And you end up with a background block that looks like this. And next, set this aside for a minute. Next, you will need a pattern for your heart. I use freezer paper for most of my patterns. 2 sheets of freezer paper pressed together, and then I just folded it in half and cut my heart out. Now, to get the size heart that I'm using, you would draw a line. Your line from here to here is 6 3/4 inches. From this point to this point is 6 3/4 inches. Take an inch down and go from this section out to the widest part of the heart is 6 1/4 inches. And then the middle of this line here up to the widest part of the heart, or the tallest part of the heart, I should say, is 3 inches. And then you just shape it out into a heart and get you an applique. That'll be about this size. It won't be exact because you're doing it freehand, but it will be very close. And I can show you how to do that. This is 1/4 inch grid paper. And if I draw a line, make sure I'm down low enough that I can get the loop at the top, the rounded part at the top. 6 3/4 inches. Draw a line up. Then you come down an inch on that and you draw 6 1/4. Then you find the middle of that and you draw 3 inches up. And I just kind of guessed on the middle here. And then you round that out. Into the shape of your heart. and you just shape it until you're satisfied with it. And you cut it out, and there you'll have a heart. And that's going to be pretty much real close to what I'm using here. See? Almost perfect. Anyway, so that's how you get a heart the size that I'm using. But you could use any size heart that you wanted to use. You just want to kind of fill that center of that 12.5-inch background block. Okay, so once you have got that together, you'll cut out some heart shapes from both fabric and batting. I'm using cotton batting, but you could use polyester. You could use a blend. I love cotton batting most of the time for the quilting things that I do, but I end up with your fabric hearts and your batting hearts. Next, you would take your fabric and lay it face down on top of your batting and just pin all around the edge. You will end up with a heart that's pinned like this. Then you would take this and you would stitch all the way around from the side, a 1/4 inch, all the way around from the fabric edge, not the batting. Sometimes the batting might be a little larger, a little smaller, depending on how accurately you've cut it, but you want to make sure that you're going by the fabric edge, 1/4 inch away from the fabric edge, making sure that you catch the batting in the seam. So you'll stitch all the way around, just like that, making sure you catch your batting in. Then you will end up with a heart like this. Batting on one side, fabric on the other. And here you see I've already snipped it, because you're going to snip that. What you'll do is you lift this batting up. You'll separate the two after you stitch all the way around and snip the batting, leaving a slash like this so you can turn it. And then you'll want to go around and you'll trim the edge of your heart. Close to your stitching, but don't snip your stitching. And then you'll snip to the point here, or the curve. This one's kind of curved, but snip this a little bit. Make it turn easy. It'll make it turn easier. After you've stitched all around and snipped down into that little point there, or curve, you will then turn your heart right side out. Being careful not to tear up your batting. And I like to use a chopstick. Once I've got the bulk of it turned. Make sure you got a nice smooth shape. And once you've got it nice and turned, take it over to the iron and you press it. After you've gotten it pressed, you'll have a heart that looks like this, with batting on the back of it. Turned edges, and nice and flat. I starch my heart so it adds a little stiffness and it's a little easier to add embellishments to it. This this opening here, if you're using a light fabric, sometimes it'll show through the front. It'll kind of shadow through. To prevent that, you can just iron a piece of fusible interfacing to this section here, and it'll hide that. Won't show through. So you end up with a heart like this. After that, I select my embellishments, my ribbons, my trims, my buttons, whatever I want to put on there. I just play around with it till I like what, I've pulled together. And once I've done that, then I will take my heart. I've got one here that I've already picked things out for. And I've got some trims, some metallic trim, and 2 different buttons that I'm going to put on here. And what I will usually do, I'm not a perfectionist. So I don't spend a lot of time making sure that it's exactly the right, this side is exactly like this side. I eyeball it and get as close as I can with my eyes. And I kind of use my grid. So I'll put the point here on a line, and then I'll center this here. And then from there, I'll eyeball it. So I'm going to put a trim here. And I'm going to put a trim here. And I'm just kind of using my grid to get it where I want it. Once I've got it where I want it, I turn my ends under. Pin that. Do the same thing down here. Folding it under nice and snug along that edge. And pinning it down. Then sometimes I will take hot glue and put my buttons in place. Or I'll just do them one at a time and hand stitch them. But even when I hot glue them, I go back and I stitch them down. I'm going to start with the large button here. Small button. Large button. Another small one. Okay. Then I'm going to stitch these down. I'll stitch these on. You can do them. Some of them I can do by machine, but most of them I'm doing by hand. Because I don't want to break my buttons. Risk breaking my buttons with the needle. Or breaking my needles. But anyway, so I will stitch these down. Zigzag stitch along this side and this side of the ribbon. Both edges of the ribbon, I'll zigzag. And then I can either leave it like that or I can add more to it. Here's one that I have completed. And this is how it comes out. This one, the buttons are glued on right now, but I'm going to go back and hand stitch them on. The ribbon is stitched down already. And I can either continue to add embellishments to this or I can leave it as it is. And once I'm happy with my heart, then I go back to my background block. And I center it with this with my cornerstone at the top of my heart. And I do use my grid for this. To kind of center everything up. And the way that I make sure that I'm getting my hearts in the same place is I use my Omni Grid ruler and I place it an inch away from the edge. Line the edge of the heart up there with the edge of the ruler. Pin it in place. Then I come over here and do the same thing. Making sure that the point stays here, lined up with the point of the background. So then I will just kind of shift this a little bit. And just make sure I press my heart right up against the ruler, an inch away. Keeping this straight and this straight with the points. And I pin that down. Then I'll stick a couple more pins in here. And I will take it to my sewing machine and do a decorative stitch around here. What I've been using is either a zigzag or a buttonhole stitch or a blind hem stitch. I really like the blind hem stitch when I do applique. And you end up with a block that looks like this. So I hope you enjoyed that idea. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, please leave them down in the comments section. And if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe. I'm going to show you again the quilt. And when I get finished with all these quilts, I'm going to do a trunk show. So I hope you'll join me then too. God bless you. Hope to see you next time. God bless. Bye-bye.